Welcome back. This is Keith Vass on Talking Points on Leica Radio. What's it like when you follow a particular career path that everyone expects you to follow? You then suddenly change and you do something totally different. My guest in the second part of this program is Shiv Singh, who was born and raised in Slough, Berkshire. He went to Aston University, studied business management, and completed successfully a degree. He was always striving for academic success, as we all expect in the Asian community. It's what's called part of that Asian mentality. And he had a burning desire to achieve that. He then went from the path that he was on and he decided to do something quite different. He loved his time in the corporate world, but then 9 years later, he decided to do something different and decided to work for himself. Let's talk to Shiv Singh, who joins us this morning from Slough. Good morning, Shiv.
Good morning, Keith. Thank you for having me on your show.
Now, Shiv, what's interesting about your career and what will resonate, I think, with many of our listeners is that you started on the traditional path and then you did something quite different. When you were at university, you were clearly on that path. This is what family and what we call the Asian mentality required of you. What was that experience like?
Yes, so I think growing up, Keith, as you quite mentioned, the Asian mentality, the Asian culture is very much focused on education, safety, finding a good job, and then working your way up that ladder. And I think that was very much the focus early on in my life. I studied very, very hard at school, very hard at university, and actually I put a lot of pressure on myself as well. And I think that mentality growing up of success equals education, success equals passing your exams can become embedded in our minds very early on and have this extra pressure that we put on ourselves. So I feel that growing up, I always had this pressure. I always had this goal of striving towards the working world, making my way up that ladder. And that was very much my focus at university until, of course, I graduated and I finally entered that corporate world.
Now, you then changed, didn't you? Having gone into the corporate world for 9 years, you decided to do something different. Why did you make that change?
It's a great question. I think 9 years on, when I look back, I was very much following the traditional path of keep working your way up the ladder. But the ladder has no end. And every time you reach one milestone, and I'm sure we'll go into the details in a moment of what that was like, but when you reach one milestone, you're immediately looking at, okay, how can I reach the next? And you often have to ask yourself the very simple question of why. Why am I looking for these different milestones? Why am I always looking at what's next? And essentially, 9 years into my life, various things were happening. And I just asked myself that one very simple question. And the answer I got back was essentially, I'm seeking external validation. I'm seeking praise. I'm seeking comfort from others. And I'm receiving that. Previously, it was in the form of degrees in education. And now it's in the form of promotions in the workplace. So that led me to changing my career path, actually identifying my why and taking action on it.
And how important is it to stop when you're on a particular path, to think, to look, and to listen and decide, is this what you're going to do for the rest of your life? Do you think that in terms of that famous poem, we just have no time to stand and stare because the train is moving so fast?
It's a great analogy. And I think actually we have the time, we just don't prioritize that enough. And unfortunately, we're in this culture from childhood where it's constantly, okay, now we go to school. Okay, from school, it's homework. From homework, it's then A levels. From A levels, it's then university. There's always constantly this race of what's next. And in our community, and in my mind especially, taking a stop and reflecting and just analyzing is time wasted because that time can be spent moving forwards in your career and your process. So unfortunately, we talk a lot in the world nowadays about machine learning, lots of data in the world. Well, but the most data that exists is in our brains, on ourselves, and unfortunately, we don't access that. So the power of stopping and the power of self-reflection, which is essentially downloading data on yourself and identifying trends and using that to inform what you should do next, is underrated amongst the world, but definitely within our community is often seen as a very much a doing community. We should constantly be moving on the next thing and not stopping, but actually that slows us down in the long run.
This is Keith Vaz on Talking Points on Leica Radio. I'm talking to the young and successful entrepreneur Shiv Singh. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to ask him about that gap year that he took off. Why is that so important to him and to others? And about his new business. How is he helping small businesses survive in this cutthroat corporate world? Join us after the break. Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Talking Points on Leica Radio. I'm talking to Shiv Singh, a young and successful entrepreneur. Shiv is with us to talk about corporate life and then what happened after that. Shiv, in 2018, there were a series of major life changing events which forced you to take that year out of your career. And you talked a little bit about that earlier. Tell us precisely what happened that caused that break in 2018.
Yes, sure, Keith. I think I took a break in 2018, and unfortunately, it often takes serious things for us to just take a step back and realize that we need to reflect and need a break. And that's exactly what happened with me. Both my parents were seriously unwell in that point of time, and living at home, as many people do in the Asian community. And that meant I needed to take a step back and spend some time with them. Also, I had my own relationship issues going on. And then unfortunately, on top of that, we had multiple deaths in the family. So very close relatives, cousins and uncles. So there was an amalgamation of lots of different things that had happened. And essentially that taught me that I'm in this race, but now I'm forced to take a step back. The universe is almost forcing me to, rather than me willingly realizing that I need to take that break. So yeah, that was what essentially caused me to put a pause and to reflect and take a break.
Well, I suppose you never believed that right in the middle of this new career that you'd chosen, a global pandemic would strike, which puts everyone really on the back foot. Nobody ever believed this would happen. We're looking at the big companies, how they cope, getting people to work from home. What about the way in which your enterprise has prospered during these 2 years? What's it been like for you?
I think for me, COVID, and so taking my break in 2018 and amalgamated with COVID forced me to realize that there's multiple pillars in my life. There's multiple pillars in all of our lives beyond just work and business. And I think having that balanced view has really helped me in my business now, because there's no longer a glamorization of this hustle 24/7 culture and getting caught up in just 24/7 work. I now realize there's a difference between working in your business and working on your business. And constantly we're so focused on just working in our business. So COVID has allowed me to take a step back, spend some time working from home as well, and dedicate time to now working on the business. And what I mean by that is essentially, okay, how can I take the business to the next level? Where are the areas for improvement? What can be done differently? Reaching out into this whole network of people. I've spoken to in the last 6 months alone around 20 odd people that I've never met before ever, via Zoom, via LinkedIn, because I've just spent time working on the business and networking and building real meaningful relationships. So I think that's the number one learning. And that's also the number one reason why small, medium businesses get stuck, is because they're stuck working in and not on.
Your new job is to help young businesses, new businesses, businesses that are put together by people who perhaps have never been in business before. What's it like? Do people take your advice, or are you dealing with people who just are determined to do what they want?
So I'm very blessed in that I get to work with a range of different businesses. And my career in the corporate world, I was working with some of the world's leading companies. So billion-dollar companies, multi-million pound companies. What I do now is essentially I'm taking those global learnings, those learnings from the world's leading firms, and I'm making it accessible to other businesses, small, medium businesses, that law firm down the street, that small marketing agency, that person who's maybe a one-man band, maybe there's a few more people in that organization. I'm packaging up those global learnings and making them accessible to small, medium businesses. And yes, they do listen. They listen because essentially you're bringing leading insights and global insights, but you have to make it translatable onto that small medium business scale. And I think that's only one part of it. The other part of it is you as an individual, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be very genuine and open, because essentially that is the key to building meaningful relationships. So having the insights plus being open and building meaningful relationships allows you to add real value to these companies.
I want to ask you a final question specifically about Asian businesses. It's usually the case when someone from the Asian community builds up a business from nothing that they want their sons or their daughters to take it over. And they get to the point when suddenly they don't want to do it. The kids want to do something completely different. They just don't want to have anything to do with the family business. How do you help those who are being press ganged into going to the family business? achieve their own potential? And also, where is Shiv Singh going to be? Where would he like to be in 10 years' time?
Great question, Keith. So I think to answer part one of your question, this is just another avenue like the other avenues that Asian families can often put on their children in terms of follow this path. So follow the corporate path, follow the medical path. This is just another avenue. Follow the family business path. So what I would say is just go back to the root cause, which is rather than suggesting a certain path for your child, encourage your child and encourage individually. We should be encouraging each other to find our own why. Like, what's the thing inside you that lights you up? What gets you excited? And if you don't know what that is because you're an early on, for example, a student, then explore, try different things and find out your own why. Don't just follow someone else's why because, for example, the family business, because you may do that and you may be good at it for a little while, but it won't be sustainable. You will eventually want to stop because it's not the thing that lights you up. So find the thing that lights you up and follow that path that is lit up from within. So that would be my answer to number one. And it's a safe space. I think in our culture, we often think mistakes are bad. No, mistakes are good. It's a step closer to success. So make mistakes, celebrate mistakes, and see it as a good thing. In terms of your second part of your question, where should Sing be in 10 years' time? It's a great question. And apart from being married with kids and hopefully a nice house of my own, I think from a life perspective, I would like to be first and foremost unconditionally happy and just content with everything around me from a kind of deeper perspective. From a business perspective, I would like to keep evolving my business with new pillars and new arms. Currently, I'm offering consulting services to small, medium businesses, but already I'm finding that through working with other people and through opening myself up to the universe and just having conversations with people, new ideas are popping up all the time of different pillars that my business can have. So I would like to have a series of pillars to my business that essentially allow me to have my own little mini Shiv Singh business empire, something that fulfills me and fulfills my family.
Shiv Singh, thank you so much for joining us on Talking Points on Leica Radio. We'll make a date in the diary. In 5 years' time, we'll interview you again and see whether you're on your path. We'll play you back this interview to see whether or not you've achieved those ends. Thank you for joining us and good luck with your enterprises.
Thank you so much. I look forward to that interview in 5 years' time. And I'd also just say I'm very grateful. Thank you for having me on the program and all the best to the listeners of Leica Radio.